Elena Birindjieva, you are the head of Health Without Borders. That's a Bulgarian NGO. Health Without Borders also runs CheckPoint Sophia, which is sort of an easy place to access for people to get HIV testing. Bulgaria has pretty low incidence of HIV. So, you know, meeting these 95, 95, 95 goals, that should be no problem for you, right?
It looks like. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for your invitation. And on the first place, yes, when we speak about Bulgaria, everybody says that it's low prevalence country, and that's one of the reasons that the country is not an object of interest of international organization and politicians, because usually when the numbers are high, the interest is also high to the particular country. But I want to announce a problem of this small country, which nowadays is facing and struggling with severe political crisis, because we have elections, we have now extra elections, we are with temporary government, and from mid of 2017, we have no support, governmental, national support for HIV prevention services. This will come to a very, I think, hidden epidemic, and we will have no idea after a year probably, because 4 years we are living with the single projects from different organizations who are working in the with all the groups and risk, and with many tests provided for general population. As in the governmental places, if we don't want to do business as usual, because governmental places are usually closed now because of COVID, the access for testing for Bulgarian people is limited. And I need to announce this. Our small center in the capital of Bulgaria, Sofia, is discovering 25% every year from newly cases, and is doing integrated services. I would like somebody to listen that the most important thing to reach these goals, 95, 95, 95, will be to provide really focused, tailored services for different groups. If you don't work intensively and with interest from the politician side, the access will be very low. We will have a hidden epidemic, and we will stay again in the statistics like low prevalence country of HIV.
Thank you, Elena. Yeah, and you and I first spoke when I was writing one of our case studies for our Teleskop project, looking at what happened when the Global Fund pulled back from Bulgaria. It's technically a rich enough country that it does not qualify for funding, but we're now in this situation where a European Union country is struggling with providing basic prevention and harm reduction services. Manuel, you're an MEP. You're from a country that really pioneered harm reduction and prevention. You know, does Brussels, does the European Union as a whole have an obligation to help countries like Bulgaria, other countries maybe in Eastern Europe that are struggling a bit with providing these services?
Yes,
well,
we need.
For me, it's obvious.
Yeah, let's hear Manuel, and then Elena will go back.
Yeah. Okay.
Excuse me. For me, it's obvious. When I was very happy when I heard the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, in last September, addressing to the European Parliament in the speech about State of the Union, and saying that she's committed to a priority, to a new priority, the European Health Union. For me, it's obvious that in the health issues, we should have a more deep cooperation between different countries of the European Union, and a more large commitment from the European Commission. I think we can be happy because now we have a very much strong health program from the EU for Health, with a 5.1 billion euros of budget. It's not a so big budget, but it's 13 times more than in previous years. So it's an important source of financing, but mainly we must do some pressure in the European Council and in the European Commission, because in a lot of issues like HIV infection, we can go further, we can do better if we cooperate more, we give support to those initiatives, and mainly we should do in everywhere, in each of the 27 countries, we should use the best experience that each country has, and I think that it's not in our hands to do that in HIV infections and in other health issues. I must point out that in a recent Eurobarometer published, 89% of European citizens want more intervention of EU in social and health issues, and I think that we must hear what European citizens want from EU.
Indeed, but you know, it was the COVID crisis that really prompted all this discussion about a European health union, that prompted this extra funding. It's not clear that money would necessarily go to HIV, and so I want to actually go to an audience question on this point. How do we convince world leaders to invest in fighting AIDS in the context of COVID? And this person points to the sense that it's a low priority in the UK with years of cuts to sexual health services and global aid. This did indeed just happen in the UK, cutting funding to some major global services. Vinay, do you want to weigh in first on that one?
If I can, thanks for the really important question. I mean, what would be really frustrating is if we put all of our focus, all of the global focus, national focus, and even European focus on ending COVID and forget about HIV. And forget about the fact that, you know, last year we still had 1.5 million new HIV infections globally, that we still had 690,000 people that died of a completely avoidable disease and a completely preventable virus, which is HIV. And that so much time and effort will be focused only on COVID, and then we will end COVID in a year or two, we hope, and then we will still have a global AIDS pandemic that is not on track to be ended by 2030, even though all countries in the world have agreed actually just at the beginning of June that we need to end AIDS by 2030, and these are the ambitious things that need to be done by 2025. And so there's a few practical things that can be done. First of all, let me highlight both special thanks to Germany, to Portugal, and to amazing leadership we're getting from the European Commission and from the European Union on HIV and on COVID. I mean, in Portugal, there was a prime minister not that long ago that is now the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, that actually pioneered, as Manuel had pointed out, very innovative approaches, which were innovative at the time, but they've really borne fruit, and Portugal's actually on track to minimize new HIV infections and be one of the first European countries to actually end AIDS by 2030. And fantastic leadership we're also getting from Germany consistently on global health, including on HIV. But there is this, from a UNAIDS point of view, there is this very troubling divide we have even within Europe, where we have over 30 years of investment to end AIDS in the European context and within European member states. And then in the last mile, we don't see that leadership being maintained or moved forward by all EU member states. And we can see it really in many of the countries in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe that don't have the data. Elena's provided some really practical examples of how the COVID pandemic has actually made HIV take a backseat because resources and attention for HIV, even in the last year and a half, are not what they used to be. And so we need to be able to end pandemics simultaneously. We need to make progress against COVID-19 and against HIV at the same time. Otherwise, we're going to lose very precious time focusing much needed attention on COVID, but not at the expense of HIV.
Thanks, Elena. Back to you, and then I'll go to Andrew. You and I spoke about how HIV hasn't really been a priority for the various governments that you've been working with in Bulgaria, even before COVID. So can you just give us a sense of what that issue is, why it hasn't been a priority, and what your strategies are to kind of get more attention?
On the first place, before, when the Global Fund was there, everything was okay. There was political will, and it's very important this to be here for the countries which will face these difficulties when the Global Fund goes out. When the Global Fund withdraws, now everything freezed, and our politicians try to make some changes and to adapt to cope with the epidemic with national resources. This ended up with a lot of round tables, a lot of meetings, a lot of initiatives, and at the end, we are still without proper financial mechanism for national financing of the projects for NGOs. On this stage, we have no harm reduction programs, which we didn't have from 2 years. And believe me, in the group of drug users, it's a huge problem. Nobody knows. As the previous colleague said, there is no estimations. Bulgaria is one of the countries that is not likely to provide estimations, so we don't know what is the average of our groups, even by cities or national statistic, is poor. So on this stage, we are trying to raise the attention for national policies, because if you have no national policies, you could not go ahead and follow your goals. For example, the national program to fight AIDS 2021-2025 is somewhere in the administration desks. 8 months. We are without national program. So we are trying to make and focus the attentions of our politicians, but now we are in political crisis. We have no parliament, we have no government, and we are waiting to build our strategies after the elections in July.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very stark reminder of how dependent the HIV response can be on just sort of the status of the national government. Thank you, Elena. On that point, what is the status of kind of the general public's health literacy in Bulgaria? And of course, we've been talking about the government, but people choose their government. So is there something to be done to garner more kind of support and understanding among the general public?
We did a lot of campaigns among general public, and a national study from 2018 shows that the level of stigma is very high. Generally speaking, the nationalists are very these traditional family supporters in Bulgaria, and are very strong part of the society. And usually when we speak about HIV, the stigma was put directly on the person like a stamp. I could say that last few years there is a small improvement because of visibility of people who don't want to keep silent anymore, but usually there is a lot to do in terms of stigma among groups. And when we speak about the society and risk, for example, nobody wants to have in the small municipality, for example, methadone programs. They made protests. All the mayors go there supporting them. It's really difficult to proceed, but with slow steps, I think we need to go ahead.
Mm-hmm.